John and Tumi, thank you so much. And again, thank you for that opening panel, some great detail there. And really, it sets the scene for, I suppose, this panel now, which will be in many ways a continuation. We're now going to be looking at the role of government in making sure that the region, and indeed the wider region, is actually more attractive for investment in terms of the mining and the mineral sector. So let me get our panel up here because we do have a lot to talk about. I'd like to welcome from Saudi Arabia, the Minister of Finance. He is here with us, His Excellency Mohammed Al Jadaan. I believe he is joining us. Thank you so much. Great, as always, to see you. I'm going to put you right here. We're also delighted to welcome from Egypt the Minister of Petroleum and Mineral Resources, His Excellency Tarek Al Mullah. Come on, guys, we can do better than that. There we go. Joining us from Sri Lanka, His Excellency Nasir Ahmed is with us. Your Excellency, please join us. We're also delighted to have with us the CEO of Barrick Gold Corporation, Mark Bristow, and also the CEO of CAS Minerals, Andrew Southam. So this is our dear panel here. We're really going to be looking at and examining how we make sure that the mineral and mining sector is an attractive sector. Thank you all so much. Your Excellency Al Jadaan, we're going to start with you, and I know our audience has been listening to two ministers here, His Excellency Al Fallah and Al Kharayaf, have very much set the scene in terms of what's happening in the industry. But when we look at all of the ministries, I suppose, in the kingdom here, it really is about making sure that everybody is aligned, that everybody plays their role. So perhaps you'll bring us up to date in terms of what is the role for the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Your Excellency Bender, and welcome to everyone. I'll make it very brief. I think I would expect every other country to be going on the same route. Ministry of Finance is an enabler, supporter of the economy, and in this context, mining industry is a very critical part of Vision 2030. And the government, under Vision 2030, went through a rigorous reform to bring about really a very sophisticated government that enables, that is really using data in a very sophisticated way, in a triangulation way, to make decisions that are informed. And these are based on what is the economic return. And if you look at the mining sector, it has a significant potential for our economy. We support the ministry, we support the industry, and we wanted to make sure that the regulatory framework is there, the budgeting is predictable and consistent. There are a lot of work that has been done between the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Industry and Mining to ensure that we provide them with the platform, the enablement, the support that they need, the investors need, in terms of not only the regulatory side, but also the financial and resources side.
And all of that, I think it is that combination to bring everybody together and to make sure that everybody is aligned. Your Excellency Al Mullah, we look at what's happening in Egypt, and I'm very familiar, having been to visit you in many panels, particularly when it comes to the whole concept of petroleum mineral resources. You're really looking at them all together. But you've implemented a very much a modernization program, particularly in the mining sector. And you know, in many ways, like Saudi Arabia, you have your focus to put Egypt on the top of the mining world, so to speak. Give us a feel for what you're doing to make sure that you're well positioned.
Thank you, Etna, and I have to start by thanking the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and my dear brother, His Excellency Bandar Kharayaf, for this invitation. I'm really very impressed for this event, for its second year at a row, with this growth that has been seen that rapid. So coming back to the question, my answer is that I think that we have done a lot of success for the oil and gas industry, and we saw that it was about time to look at our minerals. And the reason that is not attracting enough investors. We needed to do some studies, and we discovered that we need to start from the beginning by changing the code, the mineral and mining laws, and to reflect what is the best practice in the world globally. Secondly, we needed to look at the fiscal regime and how it is more applied globally rather than we used to adopt the production sharing. So we needed to change to a royalty and tax, plus some other bureaucracy that we had, like licensing, permitting, and all this are normally things that most of countries have this bureaucracy, but the time now does not allow, there is no luxury in this bureaucracy to last for long. So we needed also to cut these red tapes and to start putting smoother and friendly processes for permittings and licensing. Then we needed to look also at our calibers and our human resources, the capital,
Yes.
human capital that we have, and we needed to start to bring them up to the international level by introducing some programs for development and training and so forth. Of course, not, part of the important things is to need to make more communication and more promotion and more advertising for what we have, to allow people and to allow the international communities and industry to know what advantages do we have, what minerals that we do have, and how we are actually reforming our industry. I think that over the last few years, we've been able to do some good roadmap regarding this reform, and we started to have our international bid rounds, whereby I think that we were able to attract some of the big partners, some of the big
Yes.
international names in the mining sector, and I think that we are progressing in this side.
And we'll come back and talk about some of those because there has been tremendous progress. And again, I think, the fact that you've really focused on this has made a big difference. Your Excellency, Ahmed, when we look at, what's happening in Sri Lanka, and the government has plans to really open up the minerals sector too, what would be number one on your agenda right now? What do you think is, the key area in making sure that this investment will come to Sri Lanka?
Thank you very much, Edna, and Excellency, thank you very much for inviting me today. We learned more than what we could give back for this forum. First of all, Sri Lanka has been not fully liberalized the mineral industry as of today. It has been restricted and highly regulated sector in the industry, and where even to export minerals in raw form has been banned by the government. That has restricted completely the industry so far, which we had not grown. However, Sri Lanka's policy, government policy in attracting investment, we are in the process of changing the entire process by bringing new laws and regulations which will open up the industry. That will be more friendly and create the environment in such a way that any investor could come and work within the framework. And also new laws and regulations to be robust, then transparent, and will create a fair playing field for any investors. That is our main law reform going to come. Thirdly, most importantly, so far the government has been doing business with almost in most of the sectors. Anyway, we are in the process of privatizing many SOEs. Right now, the government has taken a decision not to do business. Instead, we only regulate, monitor, and facilitate. So with this, there are so many, maybe I could share, there are so many other incentive schemes in the process that we'll be able to share. We are going to offer for mineral industries to
And it's a very exciting time, I think, in the industry, and a lot going on and a lot that you actually have to deliver, and you have to do it fast. So now I've got my two CEOs I'm going to talk to. We've heard some government perspective there. And Mark, you know, with Barrick, you work in many countries around the world too, and you work with governments. So in terms of, you know, we look at laws, we look at the mining laws, fiscal laws, we look at permitting, we look at all of that together. Where do you see, you know, what is needed to make your life and all of investors, I suppose, around the world, you know, easier and make it more attractive for all of you to come in? What do you want?
Yeah, so, you know, it is a partnership. Collaboration is a key component of developing a nation's natural endowment. And we as the mining industry really are the suppliers of capital, and the government are, it's like the very successful World Cup we've just been through. If you've got good rules, the soccer match always works. And so rules are important. At the same time, as was commented in the previous panel, mining is a long-term game. And so it's about how do you really attract long-term investment and ensure that that capital is comfortable in your country. And I must say the Saudi initiatives in mining is a world-leading initiative because it's moved away from the oil and gas legislation and created something very specific for the minerals and mining industry, and that's fantastic. And then the other one is that we see all around the world is the temptation that when mining starts to work, you increase the taxes and increase the taxes, and eventually you destroy the attraction of reinvesting in your country. And I think that is, as we've spoken here, this is a fantastic forum to have that debate. And if we all really are interested in benefiting our stakeholders, and we recognize those stakeholders are, of course, the governments that carry the responsibility of the natural endowment of the host country, the people and communities around your mines, and of course the shareholders that risk the capital, I think we'll get to the right place. And I think every one of those stakeholders have an equal say and a right to benefit equally from a country's natural endowment.
And I think ultimately it has to become a win-win for everybody. I think, you know, it's an interesting, you talked there about the danger of squeezing when life is looking good to get more taxes and that, but it really is about reinvesting and making sure that there's extra longevity there. Andrew, you know, CAS Minerals has been around, major copper player in what, about 17 years ago, launched on the international market, so really a lot of focus there. Clearly, you're doing something right. What works well with governments that you work with in terms of making sure that it does become the win-win?
Well, Kazakhstan's got a long history in mining going back into the Soviet period. And after the breakup of the Soviet Union, it adopted a strategy of attracting FDI, foreign direct investment, for the long term. And it's been very successful in that, and they've got very significant oil assets, Tengiz, for example, and they've also been successful in minerals as well. And to attract FDI long term, and picking up on a point that Mark has just made, you need to have stability. You need to have the confidence of investors in the long term. And mining is a long-term game. You have numerous stages of exploration when you true up the resource. You have various stage gate technical studies before you begin construction. You then have the construction period and then a payback period and hopefully many years of production thereafter. So mining investors look for that stability. Now, stability doesn't mean things can't change. The world moves on. And in Kazakhstan, for example, we've had a new environmental code, we've had a new mining code, we've had tax changes along the way. But these changes have been made in collaboration, in constructive dialogue with business and other stakeholders. And whilst those things have changed, the country's long-term direction of being attracted to FDI has not changed. And as a mining business operating there, that gives us the confidence to continue investing and to invest very heavily in new assets there. And I believe that's the right strategy for long-term success and not reacting to necessarily short-term trends.
Indeed, and again, you know, each country has different minerals. It's different, you know, but there's still competition for investment. Your Excellency Al-Molla, if I might come back to you, you hold the joint portfolio of petroleum and mineral resources. But even as Mark was saying there, and I think you mentioned too, how you really had to look at your mineral laws, revise all of that. And in a way, you've got two separate areas to focus on. How important is it that, you know, the focus on minerals in terms of, you know, making sure that there's incentives there for investment, you know, that it's very, very separate in a way to what you've done in the oil and gas portfolio?
Yes, this is true. But and actually, as we have heard in the previous panel and now from my dear panelist colleagues here, the CEOs, the discussion and the dialogue should be continuing, because actually first is the stability of the regime itself, the fiscal regime. When we spoke about taxes, and this is true, companies need to know that when we sign the contract, the government will not come in 2, 3, 5, 10 years and change the basis of which they have made their investment decision. And accordingly, what we do is that we have to sign, and this is what we are doing currently with our partners, is to have a special law, special contract with the partners where it is ratified by the parliament. So this will give the reassurance to the partner that this contract will not be affected by any changes that a Minister of Finance someday would like to increase their revenues by adding some more taxes or new names of the taxes like added value taxes or VAT or whatever they invent each few years. So nevertheless, this is one side. The other side is really how we have to make sure that this continuous dialogue is there, because sometimes when we are not aware of the difficulties that they have in the operations, this is something that is sometimes hindering their growth in the portfolio. But most importantly, I think that what any investor would need to see is the stability of the country itself. Political stability, economic stability, and security stability. And these are very important enablers, very important ensuring parameters for any investor. Definitely, we needed to have, and this is part of how we are transparent, we needed to have and to be guided by some international third party for, I would say, moderating or mediating the differences when we talk about implementing new regimes, especially, as you said, the best practices applied in oil and gas are not the same for mining. So therefore, we were transparent in hiring a third party international advisor to mediate and to help reaching this, I would say, balanced win-win position between the parties. And I think that this is something that we have succeeded in doing, and you will be hearing soon, perhaps during Indaba next month in South Africa, some good news about some breakthrough for our latest deals with our partners.
Yeah. Exciting news. Good, good. Your Excellency Al Jadam, we look at that stability, we look at the need for transparency, but also, and even as Mark said, capital has to be comfortable. I mean, making sure that there's return on investment. And also, I suppose, you know, encouragement and incentives. What incentives are here in Saudi Arabia to make sure that you're attracting investment?
Thank you, and I would like just to comment on
Please,
what I've
please.
heard first. First of all, I agree really with what I've heard. I think it is critical that government policies are consistent, are predictable, are long-term, and also it is very critical that when you look at the government policy, you look at the law, as in Saudi Arabia, the mining law, you could see that the mining industry and the government way of looking at it is not actually a revenue play. Mining industry is an economic play. And that is very critical to assess how the government think about it. This is not something that we are looking to extract the last penny from the mining companies. It is something that we are looking to develop the economy through, to create jobs through, to diversify the economy through, to increase exports through. And that will ultimately help the government by, when you diversify, when you grow the economy, you will obviously get more revenues from the whole economy. Second part, I think just going back to your question, if you look at actually the law, the codified law itself, you would see that actually sustainability is there in terms of financial sustainability. So the law provides for a sustainable stream of revenues that whatever comes from the industry in terms of licensing fees, in terms of even penalties, does not come to Treasury. So we have no interest in penalizing the industry. We wanted compliance from the industry. In case there is a penalty or in relation to the licensing fees and the like, they go to a fund that actually going to fund the ministry's own means and needs to enable the industry. On specific incentives, I can tell you SIDF, the Saudi Industrial Development Fund, provides up to 75% of financing mining projects. Mining projects are exempted from customs, so all customs are waived when it comes to their equipment, machinery, spare parts, and the like any other industrial project in Saudi Arabia. There are multi other incentives under the law itself as codified and under the bylaws. The message that I wanted really to deliver is for a mining industry to flourish, the Ministry of Finance will need to be on the back seat behind the mining industry. It needs to enable the mining industry, and it needs to make sure that the mining industry has the right resources and support it. I think the last also point that I need to mention is there is a very clear vision in Saudi Arabia when it comes to what is called the windfall tax. I think the biggest mistake governments and policymakers make is thinking about windfall tax. And we are seeing it now in certain countries in the world where when the oil industry, when people invested, when it was very difficult to invest, people invested in the oil industry. And now with the prices going up, they are making profits. Governments are saying, okay, now we will tax that profit. But you didn't actually support me when I bleeded, during low prices. So this is actually very short-term, selfish, unproductive thinking in the long term. I think it's just harmful for the economy.
Mark, you must be happy to hear this in terms of like what they're talking about. But again, I mean, as a key player on the production side, I mean, how aligned with government policy can you be, and how much of a partnership role can you actually offer as well?
So first of all, Your Excellency, what a speech. I think every one of the CEOs in this room will agree with me. That's what you've just attracted all the capital you can get in your mining industry with that philosophy, and it's a good lesson to a lot of the various representatives from other mineral endowed countries. So that's really, for me, the key. And again, I think to His Excellency's point, mining has to be a partnership. It's not a case of one takes and the other one gives. It's got to be collaborative. And there has to be and to the point of, mining is cyclical. And I think to the previous panel's point, the global economy is going through a tough time, and it's probably going to soften. And it's a big responsibility for us as miners in partnership with our host countries to continue to invest so that we are able to deliver the requirements to build a better world, because we all talk about climate change and green energy and all that. But if we don't develop the world, and particularly uplift the underdeveloped economies of the world, we will not have a world to live in. So mining, to the point that was made by, I think, Dominic, was it's really the flywheel of the future of this planet. And it needs to be done responsibility, but it cannot deliver without an absolute transparent partnership between the stewards of the natural resources themselves, which are the governments, and the stewards of capital, which are the mining companies.
Andrew, I'm sure you agree with that, but also let me bring you in, widen this conversation in terms of the infrastructure that needs to be put in place. Mining cannot exist in a silo. It's really about making sure, and even as His Excellency said here, bringing all the ministries together, but in terms of making sure that the infrastructure and the supply chain is also in place. How important is that?
I mean, it's critical. I mean, we're a business that builds and operates copper mines, and we looked at 70 plus undeveloped copper assets around the world, many of which are in the regions covered by this forum. And that was partly desktop exercise. We also did site visits to a number of those. And through that exercise, firstly, our concerns over future global supply increased. And secondly, and the reason for that is that we saw in all these deposits the reasons why they had not yet been developed. And that ranges from issues with communities, environmental concerns, certain political jurisdictions. But one of the other issues that came through consistently was often a lack of infrastructure. And mining, of course, needs access to power, it needs access to water, it needs transportation infrastructure, enabling us to get workers to site, enabling supplies, and of course, the route to market. And I think this is a real area that companies and governments can cooperate on. And we heard on the panel earlier the issue being raised about multiple governments cooperating where you have very significant distances crossing multiple jurisdictions. And that can cover power as well as transportation. And we believe that creates a win-win situation for both sides. Governments, of course, have a responsibility to ensure that public money is spent appropriately. And in these infrastructure projects, they should seek an anchor project which is linked to it, which should be constructed alongside the mining asset. But in terms of the return on that investment, obviously there may be fees specifically for use of that infrastructure, there may be direct taxes from that mining project, but of course mining brings wider benefit. It develops the local supply chain, it develops the local workforce, and so on. And if you can establish an anchor project for a piece of infrastructure, and that justifies it, what you'll often find in the future is that there are other smaller deposits or other businesses which would otherwise have not been feasible on their own, but through the construction of this infrastructure, they suddenly become feasible, and that extends the value that is created through this infrastructure, which opens up potentially new areas.
Yeah, because ultimately it is about economic and growth and development, for each country and even in the wider aspect. Your Excellency, Ahmed, we have a bit of competition when it comes to, bringing that investment in, and different countries, of course, have different resources, so there will be different focus on attention. But what would the incentives be in Sri Lanka in terms of when you look at investors and they're looking at you? How do you make sure that they're actually focusing on what they can do in your country?
Thank you, Edith. Being in the middle, of course, there were, my right side, two political leaders, and on the left side were the private sector concerns. I have to speak from Sri Lankan point of view. While agreeing from both point of view. I tell you that Sri Lanka is definitely going to open the mining industry for sure. And that is the thing that I want to pass this message. Sri Lanka has been one of the most or leader in graphite exporters in early 19th century. And we do have still 400 plus grids available. So since then, that has been blocked completely. We have totally not developed, opened up for the market. So that is the answer to your first question. We are going to open it, and how we are going to open it is definitely we are going to give tax concession completely. When we say we are going to introduce new fiscal policy, tax concession, tax exception, and even tax holidays, whoever wants to come and open up the industry. Where we are going to have partnership, once the industry is developed, if both parties agrees that there is potential and they are making money, in that case that we want to introduce a system after talking with them and agreeing with them, kind of a royalty fee might be maybe a much more better than or maybe more than the royalty fee what we agree initially. So this is one of the things that we are going to catch up with them. So it's a win-win situation policy that we are going to adopt. A second thing that we are in the process of establishing a mineral zone, a processing zone dedicated for mineral zone, where all the policies will be exceptionally for the attracting the private sector to come in. So where this zone also will be placed, taking few places where the minerals are there into considerations, and that zone not only will give tax concession, also facilitate all types of process. Right now, if anyone wants to open up mineral or get them mining or exploration license, they have to go through 21 agencies. Now, with the new process, that you will get it within one stop shop.
Yeah.
So
and that's what you really have to do. Your Excellency Al-Mulla, you made it very clear that you reviewed the whole focus on mining, got rid of some of that bureaucracy because people don't have time, and quite honestly, the government doesn't have time either at the moment to go through all of that. I've got about a minute left for each of you, so I'll, bring in, I suppose, a call to action and a closing comment within this. But perhaps if you can just maybe take a minute to talk to us about the international bid rounds that are coming up in Egypt and for gold and associated minerals. So what can we expect in the next year in Egypt? Where should the focus be for you?
Well, bid rounds will continue to be announced, but as I say, I have to tell you that we are improving the process itself. And actually, from the first bid round, we had some feedback. And this feedback we are working on now in order to make sure that we overcome the challenges that may face our partners. And therefore, we are in this phase of making sure that when we issue the next bid round, which will be sometime this year during 23, that we need to be sure that we had closed already whatever still pending items or under discussion that was not clear during the first bid round. So therefore, we are focusing on ensuring that we pave the proper way in order to have a more successful bid rounds. We have been able to attract good partners, and we are looking forward in order to increase the acreage of their concessions in Egypt in order to make sure that they are working at the right economies of scale in order to ensure that when they bring in some works, that this will be coupled with service companies that will come. In order to make that feasible, we need to look at economies of scale. And therefore, what we are currently doing, in addition to what the government has been doing, is the proper infrastructure that will help successful mining, and then the added value, which is the industrialization on these mines that we will be exploring and developing and extracting. The idea is, as we were talking yesterday and today in the first session panel, that we need in our regions to increase the added value and the industrialization at least one-fold, two-folds, not necessarily the final product, but at least to have in the meantime an interim product that could be then part of the global supply chain. So having said that, we are really very much keen in making things happening properly and right without any negative roadblocks again. Thank you.
And we've less than a minute each left. We have to begin to wrap this up. Andrew, if perhaps you could, when you talk to your peers in the industry too, you've heard some commitments here from the governments, but what would make your life easier, and what can you expect, what do you hope for from governments to actually help you and your peers do a better job?
Well, I think we've covered the key points really today with the stability approach from governments. That's what mining companies need in the long term. I just think that it's very, very clear that the world's future minerals are going to come from the regions covered by this conference. These minerals are going to be of increasing importance from this region, and it's our responsibility, all the stakeholders in this, to deliver those minerals in a fair and sustainable way.
Mark, for you?
So for me, I think we all talk about mining, but the future of mining is in investing in the future of mining, which is exploration. And mining is a consumptive industry, and so we consume our asset base every day, and collectively between the miners and the governments, we need to get more young geologists in the field and hunt those future discoveries. And these two ministers today represent the Nubian and Arabian Shield, same geology, just split by the Red Sea, and one of the most underexplored parts of this region, which is an exciting destination to start exploration.
Your Excellency, in terms of what's going to happen in Sri Lanka, what's the most urgent thing now for you on your agenda? Tell me.
Of course, as I said, we are just going to open up this industry. And of course, keeping in mind, as an environment minister, I will be failing in my duty if I don't mention government will promote only sustainable, economically and socially responsible mining and exploration practices within the industry. So with that, we are going to develop this industry.
And without a doubt, we're going to hear a lot more throughout the conference too, in terms of the need to really bring ESG up to the highlight. I want to leave you the closing word. We've heard from you, Mr. Al-Mullah. Thank you so much. But just we have to wrap it up now in terms of, what's next for you here in Saudi Arabia. We have a busy 2 days ahead, but a closing note from you.
Well, thank you very much. I think next have started already with the development of the mining sector in Saudi Arabia, with the alignment of the government behind this, with the support that the government is providing, with data-driven decisions that are being made by the entire government to support this sector. I think the future is bright. The government is committed. Long-term vision is there, and enabling the private sector. I mean, Vision 2030 is clear as 2030 target and even beyond, that we wanted to make sure that our private sector participation increases significantly more than what it is today. And for that to happen, we need to make sure that our international investors, our local investors are enabled, are confident, are feeling the trust, feeling the partnership.
And I think that's very important too, those two words, the key words, trust and partnership, to make sure that that is where, you look at this industry and make sure that that's there for the long term, because ultimately it is a long-term gain, and it's for the benefit of not just the producers, but also consumers and indeed everybody around. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Your Excellency Al Jadaan, Your Excellency Al Mullah, thank you so much for being with us. Your Excellency also, Ahmad, thank you so much. And Mark Bristow and Andrew, thank you again. And so we'll hand it back to you.